Hello, welcome to Datable Rebels. We are doing a show on verbal abuse today, and hopefully in a series of abuse. I'm with my co-host SaGonna, Thompson.
Hi.
And we are excited that you're with us today. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. I'm going to go in and introduce. We have Krista, Prime Juicy Podcast, a DVSA survivor, mom, wife, and all-around oddball. Welcome, Krista.
Hi, everybody. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and then we have Mato. Mato is Lakota for bear. His birth parents were addicts. His dad remarried, and his stepmother, who was white, was his abuser. Verbal abuse turned into violence and sexual abuse. He is healthy and healing every day now. To this day, he can hear her telling him, "No one is going to love you." That sucks. His addiction caused by this abuse has almost killed him. And he grew up in a home where nobody hugged or told him they loved him. He would much rather take a beating than be told it's not worthy of love. Welcome, Macho.
Good afternoon.
All right, SaGonna.
So we have the mother, healer, Reiki master, teacher, shamanic practitioner, experiencer, psychic medium, moon dancer, reality show finalist. Oh, and working on finding an agent to help her publish her first book about her lifetime of cosmic connections. So welcome, Dana. Excuse me.
Hello. Yay. Do you want to go with your first question, SaGonna?
Sure. Okay, so my first question for anyone is, how do you define verbal abuse?
Who wants to go first?
You go ahead.
For me, verbal abuse is using your words for me in my experiences, it was to degrade me, to affirm a feeling that they thought I had, to just to instill that even more of, no one's going to love you. People hate you. You're weird. You're not good enough. And a lot of my verbal abuse came from being biracial in my family and not being good enough, or being told I was only loved because I shared blood with them. And just romantic relationships, them verbally beating you down, telling you you're stupid all the time, telling them, no one's ever going to want you besides them, and you deserve to be treated this way, and verbally being beaten. It's that's what it is to me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the sole purpose of hurting you. As for me, it was a parent, so they knew what my weaknesses were, and she would actually tell me those things to keep me in line. So it's after this came up, from the time that this Zoom meeting came up till this morning, I'm glad to see how much I've grown, because it didn't hurt. I'm like, I can talk about this. I've talked about this before, but I still remember that time when you're 7, 8 years old and someone's telling you they're No one's going to love you. You're ugly. I also was biracial. My dad was African American and Native, and I wasn't Black enough or I wasn't Native enough. And I didn't know where I belonged until I'd almost killed myself with cocaine and my addictions. It wasn't until a Native man came and, saved my life. And that happened when I was like 24. But like I said in my profile, I would much rather take an ass whooping, a belt whipping, a switch, than to have to listen to verbal abuse. Because the beating, the pain will go away. The words, no, not so much. Not so much.
Those echoes.
Yeah.
The echo is always there.
Yeah, the words fuck with your mind, your mental state. It's bad.
For me, I just like, I don't know where the verbal abuse started. It must have been in my family of origin at home. My family seemed supportive, but somehow or another, I don't know what was going on or what went wrong, but I had very low self-esteem, and my first boyfriend kind of was my first husband, who I didn't know was an abuser, narcissistic abuser, and the verbal abuse, began then. But I think the verbal abuse started in my own head. Before that, I don't know how, and that's what I'm talking about, family of origin. There had to be some things that I didn't know, but in my head, I was hating myself, always hating myself, like not good enough, not this, not that. You did this, you did that. I mean, that's how I would go to sleep. Those are the beautiful dreams I would have in my head. They were horrors. So it's almost as if somehow that verbal negative language, it had to have been impressed upon me, and I sat there and did that to myself. And I feel like because I was verbally abusing myself, it opened a gate for other people throughout my life to step in, and then they could verbally abuse me as well. You know what I mean? So it's almost as if I gave them permission, because I was already doing it, but I was doing it because somehow in my childhood, I think it was impressed on me, if that makes any sense. So, and then, the verbal abuse happened, and, verbal abuse and physical violence, sometimes hand in hand. But
Can I ask a follow-up question to you? Did your mom experience any like verbal abuse when she was coming up, or maybe when she was pregnant with you?
well, her family of origin, yeah, verbal abuse. I don't know about between my mother and my father, but I do know that she didn't want to be pregnant with me. So there probably was some negative language with them back and forth. He wanted the baby, she didn't want the baby, back and forth. Yeah, that would have been going on.
It does, like you kind of said, like I'm trying to remember what you said, but I think you said something like you kind of made it's like you're taking ownership for it, and I don't think like it's yours to own, if that makes any sense. I feel like it was kind of passed down to you,
Right.
the receiver of it, and so
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like it had to have started with my family of origin, like it was impressed upon me. And then, like it's a wave.
Yep.
So they gave it to me, and then I was taking it on. And then I recognized that and was like, oh no, oh, I opened that gate. I need to shut that gate, because I was negating myself. And I'm like, I gotta stop that.
Okay.
So, and when you open the gate, then that allows other people to step in.
Right.
That, I guess that's a better metaphor.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just didn't want, I was like, I feel like she's owning this. This isn't her. It says it hurts.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, it came rolling down to me,
Yep.
some things roll
Kind
down
of
the hill.
inherited that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's kind of a similar story. I was in getting prepared for this. I was talking to my mom about, verbal abuse and things like that. And my mom, my grandmother, she took birth control and continued to be bulimic while she was pregnant with my mother. Did not really want her. My grandfather would call my mom a fat whore, stupid bitch, all of these things. And then in looking at my mom's relationship with her ex-husband, who we describe as a wolf in sheep's clothing, she would do a lot of the same things to him that was done to her. And then in turn, it would be done to me and my siblings. So it is very much so a trickle down effect. And also, I wasn't necessarily a wanted pregnancy. My mom was told that she was a race traitor and evil and all of these things because of who she chose to happen to procreate with and all of those things. And that, trickled down. And it, like I said, it is very much so a trickle down effect. And it is, I could say it would be genetically inherited for you to automatically just go to verbally abusing yourself. I would say that is something that is very, very scientifically possible.
Yeah, that's interesting because my second question is, how much do you think childhood traumas affect the abuser or abuse? It makes a person abusive from being abused. Obviously, yeah.
That is very, very, my opinion is that is a very, very true statement. And I know even I'm probably the youngest person in this group, just age-wise. Sorry, I'm not
Are you bragging?
But I am only 34 years
Like a
old.
judgment to me.
I'm sorry. I am only 34 years old, but
Well, you're
emotionally, I feel like I am above a lot of my peers when it comes to being emotionally aware and being able to identify certain things just because of the traumas that I have gone through and being able to face those traumas and being, no, I'm not going to let those happen again. And when I was, younger, I was a young mom. I did find myself and my ex-partner falling into the abusive things that I saw when I was a child and the traumas that I experienced. And after that relationship, just dissolved, and there is probably some damage done to my children because of the things that they saw. And I'm going to own that. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that as they grow now, they're not going to follow those patterns,
Yes.
So
Something happens to people that have been through trauma, like we're very aware of our surroundings and, like we've been through some shit. So it makes us older than we are, so it makes sense that you feel older than 34. You said 34, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and like I said, with my children, I know I had my first son when I was 20. I was not ready, but just societal standards, you make those choices, you get married, you have that baby, no matter what, you make it work. And it was not working, and there was really bad addictions in there. And then from my childhood, that could be a whole book, they started to show face in my adult life, and I have chosen to say no more, but I can't say that for everybody.
Yeah, good for you. I mean, that's why this was so important to work on healing our traumas, which is a lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm. Especially with other children involved. I don't want to send any more damage out into the universe than needs to be. So
For me, it ended up like, so it all focused around my stepmother, and she was young. There were 8 children in the house under the age of 11. That's how we were all steps. We were the same age or steps or halves. But my birth mother, when I was a baby, left me at a Catholic church on a Sunday. And I rejoice in that because she could have fucking killed me, put me in a garbage can, flushed me down a toilet, whatever. And but my stepmother knew that was a sticking point for me, because I'm like, what's wrong with me that my mother left me, not my other siblings, took me and left me, like didn't want me. So that always bugged me. And then my stepmother would verbally abuse me using that to keep me in place. And that's what she would do. She would verbally abuse me until I guess my spirit was broken. I would just be a good boy for the weekend or the day or the afternoon or whatever. It did lead to violence, the verbal abuse, because we lived in a small northern town. Stepmom was a nurse, dad was head of radiology. We were a pretty prominent family in our little town. But back in the 70s, nobody talked about shit that happened in the family. It was all secret. And a situation happened where I ended up in front of a judge asking me if I wanted to go to foster care. And I already had a teacher that was gonna take me in as a foster. And what happened is that became common knowledge in that tiny little town because it was court. It was seen in front of a judge. So now the veil has been lifted and everybody knows about this fucking horrific abuse that's going on. And that day when I went home with my stepmom and my dad, because my dad cried in the courtroom and said, Mato's my only son left in my house. And I thought, holy shit, my dad really loves me. I'm going to stay with him. That day when I went home, I was sleeping in my bed and my stepmother stabbed me in my chest right above my heart. She tried to kill me. And after that, the sexual abuse started. She started manipulating me in regards to, she's the only one that's going to love me. And as a young boy, it was confusing as fuck. And I actually kept that secret up until 2 years ago when I finally told my brother. And so I always think like verbal abuse is a catalyst. And I see in the folks that I'm with that it's ongoing and it's long-term and it affects people differently. Almost everybody that I bring to a sweat lodge with me for healing was either sexually abused or physically abused. And it's detrimental to their health, their mental health. And I always think like verbal abuse is the catalyst to other abuses coming. And I think the thing for me and my family is that I have 2 older sisters. One is 61 and one is 58. And they are literally trapped in their 13-year-old mind from the abuse that they suffered. And I don't know. Like I said, verbal abuse for me, I'd rather take the beating than the verbal abuse. That's what I have to share.
Thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
I'm okay with it. Like I really, in the 80s, I was in New York City. I was addicted to cocaine for a little bit, almost killed me, went to prison, and it saved my life. And I'm good. I'm good. I can look back and see the abuse and see the cycle of it. But as far as like having it affect me today, someone told me in my addiction, and this is how I got clean. this lady looked at me and was like, fucking Mato, all those people that hurt you are dead. They're in the ground. They're dust. Why are you killing yourself for these people that hurt you who are now dead? They don't deserve your life. And then I was like, fuck, that makes a lot of sense. Why am I hurting myself for shit that doesn't exist anymore? Like, they're dead. And that kind of cleared my mind on that.
It's a powerful thing to say, and it's true, but it's also like, you have to do the work, you know, like it doesn't just go away.
And that's
right?
what my medicine man told me. I have a medicine man that passed away earlier this year, but he was my medicine man for many years. And he said, Creator will meet you halfway. Creator will meet you halfway. You got to go to that halfway point. And then Creator will pick you up and continue on. But if you don't do anything, nothing's going to change. You have to do something. You have to speak about it. You have to, walk your walk, and you have to be really honest with yourself. Like I had so many secrets, and I was good at covering them up, but every once in a while that door would open and this shit would just flood out. I'd be like freaking out. I'm like, oh, I haven't really taken care of that. I've just tucked it away really good. So I tell people all the time, I went to a nine-week outpatient, and I told the psychiatrist, I was like, are you willing to hear this? Because I've talked to psychiatrists before, and they told me that they couldn't handle my shit. And I spent 9 weeks and 1 hour a day with a psychiatrist, and I just unloaded everything in my life, and I put it out there. And what I did was that when I woke up in the morning, I would go to my altar and I would put one thing on my altar, and it would stay on my altar till I was comfortable with where it was and it wasn't hurting me anymore. And that's kind of, what I go through. I'm getting ready to have another sweat in a couple weeks just for that same thing, and I'm teaching people that aren't native, like what this means, this rebirth that happens. And I have to do it for myself. We're coming out of winter, we're coming into spring. It's a time for life and new growth. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for doing the work and calling others into it. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Do you have another question, SaGonna?
Or another question is, at what point did you believe or did you know that it was verbal abuse? So at what point did you realize what was happening to you?
After I left, it took that long.
So when you left, you left for other reasons, obviously, and then you look back and you were like,
Yeah.
well, I was being verbally abused, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I left. The situation that I left, I was 19. Me and my mom got into a fight. I ended up moving in with him and his mom, who had a very interesting dynamic as well. His mom was also very verbally abusive to him, and everything. And so I ended up living with them. I ended up getting a job. So then the financial abuse started, where I was the only one with the job. I was the only one that was paying for everything. They were on assistance. They had a nice house, and it was like $80 a month. And that was all they paid. I paid for everything else. Okay, whatever. I was young, in love, whatever. I'm doing my grown girl thing, like, I'm going to prove my mom wrong. I can do this. And then it just evolved. His mom ended up leaving the house. All of the power got shut off, electricity, all of these things. And so the financial abuse was super strong. And then he proceeded to show up at my jobs. And if I was working with a male coworker, would make it impossible to work. I could not work. I would literally have to leave work, or that other person would leave work because he would sit outside and just be outrageous for no reason. Well, he also had his own issues, but like, and that was that showing its face there. And in the midst of that, there was always, oh, you're stupid, oh, you're cheating on me, oh, you're not grateful, you have a house to live in, and oh, you need to do this because X, Y, and Z. And then I slowly started to pull away, and I did end up moving back in with my mom. I did try to break up with him. He cried for 3 hours and did not believe me. And then, so in my brain and my processing, I was like, you know what? I'm going to cheat on him. If someone cheats on you, because that's what I learned in my childhood, if someone cheats on you, that means they don't want you. You know, like you're done. Like they don't want you anymore. You're not good enough. So in my mind, it's like, okay, I'm going to cheat on him. He proceeded to hold me hostage for 3 days, rape, beat, spit on me. Honestly, that was one of the worst things that has ever happened to me, is being spit on top of being told that I was a whore and a bitch and a slut. And even before then, before that situation that I know is not correct how to end a relationship, those words were being said to me, so I believed it. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to think I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I'm also going to let you know that I don't want you anymore. But it backfired, and he ended up stalking me heavily. And in the midst of that, he was still verbally abusing me through voicemail. Other people that he knew would also verbally abuse me for him, I guess. And until he actually went to jail, which didn't happen until like 3 years later. Like, he drove a car into a house, tried to kill me, which showed up at my house. Like, I was not safe. And the police always said that they couldn't do anything, even though they instated the restraining order, because they didn't serve him papers. There was nothing they could do. But that entire time, it was just nothing but verbal attacks, because he couldn't physically be with me at that time. And then finally, when he went to jail and it all like stopped for the most part, I realized that the words that he was saying was worse than the actual physical things he was doing. I would have rather him show up at my door and punch me in the face than call me and berate me for no reason, or call me and berate my voicemail, because I would rather him like physically have hurt me, because that was exhausting. It was exhausting. But until I left and fully was able to detach, did I realize that that was there. And same with my mom and her ex-husband. I didn't realize a lot of the things that he said were verbal abuse, because I really only saw some of the physical things. So, yeah, and I know for a lot of people, it's not until they leave that they realize that those passive aggressive digs, or those, just little, sometimes it's something little, like I'm bad at doing laundry. It could be like, oh, well, at least I can do laundry, like even something stupid like that. If it is, you're not good at, and they know that, they're going to use it. And sometimes until you leave, you don't know.
Yeah. For me, I kind of knew that it was going to come to an end when this is a story I tell people. We were poor. I mean, we didn't have a lot. So we would get like commodity peanut butter, and then once, if we were really fancy, we'd get jelly. And sometimes the jelly would have strawberries in it. So as a kid, I would take the strawberries out of the jelly and put them on the side of the plate, because I wanted them for my dessert. And my stepmom saw me putting my fingers in my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and she smashed my hand in the jelly sandwich. And I jumped up and I told her, I swore at her. I said, if you ever fucking touch me again, I'm going to kill you in your sleep. And that's when I knew I had the power, because I saw the fear in her eyes. I think she realized that I was 14, I was strong, and could I kill her? Hell yeah, I could kill her in her sleep. And that to me was the point where I decided that I didn't have to take this shit anymore, you know? But it doesn't always end that well. What I ended up doing was I was so desensitized to violence that an Army recruiter saw that in me. I had witnessed homicides, I'd witnessed murder up close, and I was desensitized to death. And they took advantage of that. And as 17, my dad signed me into basic training. And by the time I was 19, I was over in Beirut after the Marine barracks bombing in the early 80s. And I became a killer. That's what I was. And I realized I was good at it. And that brought on a whole another level of healing that had to take place. You know, that military service. Back in the days when they didn't have reporters and photographers in your platoon, you were just free reign. You could do whatever you wanted in that city. And then after the military, in the Native community, we have something called Hector. And I became Hector. And Hector is someone that you get a note to, you send a message somehow, but Hector is the person when the police, the court, everything that's supposed to protect you doesn't protect you, and you need someone to right a wrong. And I spent many years being Hector. And I didn't realize till later that I was still trying to kill myself by being Hector. Because if your ex took off with your baby, I would chase him down and get the baby back. If a pimp was in your life, I would go after the pimp. And I realized that I was still not dealing all the way back to that verbal abuse of no one loves you, no one's gonna love you, you're not gonna amount to shit, you know? And what it did for me really in the long run was I raised two very healthy children. I have a 26-year-old son and a 31-year-old daughter. My daughter is successful. She owns her own restaurant in Houston. She doesn't have any addictions. She doesn't have bad men in her life. And my son is a mechanical engineer and he doesn't have any addictions and he's a good kid. So I always just look at my children and go, yeah, you know, I healed well enough to raise good kids, and they never saw. I almost coddled my children. I wanted to keep them safe all the time. I didn't want anybody in the world to hurt them. And some of that coddling, you know, ended up causing a few, you know, I'm like, no, you have to go to college. You have to leave home. You have to go to college now. And, but I look at my children and know that I've healed and know that I've progressed. The sad point is that I'm 57 and I'm being treated for cancer right now. And so that always, for me, I'm just glad that I have good kids that never had to really experience, you know, that type of verbal abuse or that violence. Like I said, it always comes back to verbal. It always seems to come back to that verbal abuse, and then you just accept more forms of abuse because you've already accepted that verbal abuse as something. And it's like you and I both said, I'd rather take an ass whooping. I'd rather have you just come and punch me in my face, get it over with, put some ice on my fucking nose, than deal with verbal abuse that hurts and cuts so deeply. You know, and then you realize, like, what a son of a bitch. You know that hurts me, and you say those things and you do it anyway. That's hatred. That's just hatred.
So I'd rather have the scar of like I have I self-harmed a lot because it was easier to bring that internal pain out physically. So you could look down and say, yep, there it is. There's that pain. That's what that is. And instead of, not knowing why you're angry, not knowing why you're sad, not knowing why you hurt, there's that physical part. So like you said, just come punch me in the face. So then I feel it like now instead of forever.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's an attack on the soul. Like a bruise is an attack on the body, and yeah, you can physically harm the body, psychologically so, like if someone's raped, but it's kind of like the verbal abuse. They know they're hurting your soul. They're punching deep. And like for me, that goes around and around in my mind all that time, that circulates, and then we keep harming ourselves because we keep, how do you break that? How do you get rid of that from your soul and your thoughts? It's a lot of work to stop that. And what Mato was saying about, our children, I would, when I had kids, I was like, I treated them as if they were adults. Basically, that's how I talked to them. I did goo goo gaga, but, people talk about the terrible twos and stuff. See, this is me not wanting to roll it forward onto them, because I heard people saying, oh, the terrible twos. And I just kept talking to my children like sentient beings and good people. And I never got the terrible twos or the terrible threes, because my children, were honored or something, and they weren't this. And so when I'm out in society and I hear people talking negatively to a 2 or 3 year old, that triggers me. And I want to say to them, don't talk to them like that, because they're going to reach your expectations. If you're calling them an idiot or stupid or brat or all these negative words, they're going to rise to that expectation. But if you tell them what a good person they are, a good child and everything, they'll rise to that expectation too. So, like it's all these little small micro pains and targets, just even to little children and stuff like that. I mean, these are the small aggressions that might not be the big ones, the obvious ones, but even these small ones, and they add up and stuff like that. So, and then, some of that abuse will start to grow in some families or not, but I just see these people talking negatively to little children, and I'm like, oh, this is how it starts. This is where it's starting. Don't talk to your child like that. They understand what you're saying. We just do. It's just if you're little and you can't form the words, it's kind of like learning a foreign language. You can't maybe form the words, but you can hear and understand what they're saying. And I'm like, children understand. So these little microaggressions or even major ones, people sit there at a baby, you blankety blank baby, and it's like, oh my God, that baby understands, even if they can't say it, they know. So yeah, and I think, and then all those microaggressions, like for me, yeah, I was sexually abused as a child. I think it started in first grade. That opens that door, that being disvalued. And here's somebody that comes along and they love you. Aren't you great? So yeah, I think that abuse rolls forward like that. So anyway, so aho, Mateo.
Oh, I have a weird, it happened to me when I was in kindergarten. This is how I found out I was biracial, because nobody in my family really talked about it. And it stuck with me, and it gave me this weird complex with my hair. A kid called me a ramen noodled head N-word. And that has stuck with me my entire life. It wasn't even a family member, and I've never seen this person again. Don't even remember their name, but I remember those words. And that's, that started off, all of the questions to my family, like, what do they mean? My kindergarten teacher explained to me why they said that. I didn't hear it from a family member. And so those words have always stuck with me. And I know it wasn't I mean, obviously those are things that he heard at home, because I mean, I don't expect most kindergartners to say those things. I don't know, but world's crazy nowadays. This was in the 90s, so I guess it's not too far from the course in Oklahoma, especially. But yeah, those words still stick with me today, and some days I still have issues with my hair because of that.
It's crazy how somebody can say something to you and you just remember it for the rest of your life and they don't even know.
Mhm.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even sometimes when it's your parents who were your verbal abusers, they'll just flat out tell you, I've never said that to you. Those words have never come out of my mouth. I would never do that to you. So not only are they verbally abusing you, now they're gaslighting you to be like, am I really remembering my childhood the right way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait, am I the crazy one? You know, so it's a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle.
And it could be that they either don't remember saying those things to you because it was so normal and natural, or yeah, they realize they said those things and now you're in a different place, so they have to change it. And I never said that. Are you sure? You must have heard it from someone else, not me.
Mhm.
So
That is a mind fuck.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I feel I'm sorry about that. So like my mom, she was raised, I guess what would be the silent generation. She was born in 1969. And so just some of the things that she'll even say to her parents when we would, you know, sometimes those conversations would get brought up, they would be like, we're not going to talk about that. They just, no, never, like, and I'm like, how could you not? And I still find my mom sometimes defaulting to that when it's something that makes her uncomfortable. When I bring up certain things that happened in my childhood, it just, it's done. We're done. Like, nope, we're not talking about it. Which sometimes I feel like is worse, because it's like, well, but it happened and you're not denying it. So let's figure out why, you know. I'm a why person. I'm like, let's figure out why this made everybody uncomfortable. Why are you upset with me? Why am I upset with you? Let's not let this go away. If you feel so deeply that you're that upset or bothered by it, let's talk about it. That's the type of person I have become, because I don't like to let things sit and just simmer, unless it is one of those things where you have to process and properly express your emotions, because doing things in anger is never a good thing.
Yeah. But to have something, you know, like to want to talk about this with your parent, whatever, they don't want to. It's so dismissive.
Well, and like like Krista's asking for, there's been verbal abuse and she's asking for verbal healing. It's verbally healing. You're being a verbal healer, you know, you've experienced the other side of it. And so you have that side. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And hopefully, you know, someday maybe she'll be accepting of it, but you at least planted that seed, you know, you planted the seed. It'll get some roots and maybe grow, get a little green. Maybe later you can ask again, but you know, you're a verbal healer, so that's beautiful.
I like that, verbal healer.
It's kind of like, too, you know, not knowing. I mean, you probably know some of the things your mom went through, but when you look at it like that, the people in previous generations, you know, things happen and you don't speak on it. For like you said, the silent generation, for so many years, there's been so many things, even with, you know, I kind of look at this like, as a Black person, if I lived in the slavery days, would I be one of those people that were killed instantly because of my mouth? Or would I be one of those people that would have turned into like a submissive person and did whatever massa said because I didn't want everybody else to get hurt and I didn't want to be hurt. And it's kind of like, I think about that all the time. And I'm like, I'm so glad I wasn't born back then, because I don't know what type of person I would have been. But how did I get there? What was I thinking when I said that?
We're talking about the silent generation.
But yeah, so like, even back in slavery days, when there were people and they wanted to get away, it's like, no, we can't interrupt what's here. We got to stay here. And it's kind of like, a lot of times people, they don't know what's on the other side, so they don't want to rock the boat, or they've put themselves in a position to where they've learned to cope. And so they don't even realize, like, it's kind of like they've completely gaslighted themselves. They do not believe they have whatever happened, and it's completely like shut down from their memory. They've disassociated with it completely. And so, not sticking up for your mother, but just saying, like, she could have completely disassociated, not want to realize it, not realize it at all, and don't know what it will take for her to get her own healing. But
well, and I know a lot of some of the things from my childhood is when she was with her ex-husband. Like, he was the type, he'd write $100,000 hot check and then say, no, I didn't. Like, it's like, but I have the proof. That wasn't me. He was that type of person. And so I do not fault her for having any type of dissociation with that situation, because it was so traumatic for her being in a romantic relationship with somebody that just evil. That's all I can say about him, is just evil. And I know the reason why she let it happen is because she was told by her family that she would never do better. She would never get out of Oklahoma. She would always be that white trash, native girl that, nobody's ever going to love. And she was with him and she got out of Oklahoma. She was able to get out. She was able to do things that her family told her she wouldn't be able to do. And I know that's a big reason why she stayed. And then because I saw that, I kind of internalized, like, okay, sometimes you just have to deal with certain things to get what you want. But nowadays I have adopted the motto of, in no part of our relationship is it okay for you to speak to me like that, to coworkers, friends, bosses, random people that feel like they can just come at me sideways for no reason. And I will tell people, you do not get to talk to me like that. And when you can speak to me like an adult, then we can have the conversation, and I will just walk away. And it's amazing how dumbfounded people get when you do that, when you don't let them speak to you the way that other people let them speak to them. They're like, whoa. They either get angry or they completely shut down because they don't know what to do. I even tell my kids, I teach my kids that. I was like, if someone is making you feel less than by the words that they're saying, you tell them they're not allowed to speak to you that way. And when they can speak to you in a respectful manner, then we can finish the conversation. I don't care. You don't just get respect because you're in an authoritative way. Because one of my children at school has issues with some people, and some people have come at him sideways, and he has used that, and then the situation got resolved in a proper manner. So
It's a boundary. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that I tell everybody. And I'm a server and a bartender, and I've said it to some of my guests too. I'm like, no, that's not how this is gonna work. Yes, I am a server, but I am not your servant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not. No.
There's that verbal healing. You're being a verbal healer. Heal it.
And I'm not always the best. I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And, like I said, with my children when I was younger, I've probably said things that have stuck with them. And like I said, I'm going to own that. I'm going to own the shit out of it. And if my children decide when they're older, hey, you know what? I'm going to cut ties with you because of X, Y, and Z. And until you can fix X, Y, and Z, we're not going to have a relationship. And I sure as hell will go fix X, Y, and Z, because that's only fair.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I just respect all three of you. I mean, healing that you've been doing and then having kids on, you know, in the mix on top of that. It's pretty amazing. My next question is like, if you have kids, have they witnessed you being verbally abused?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And even with my current husband, we've been together for 10 years now, and we've, you know, essentially grew up together. Like we've known each other forever, which is, you know, we started our relationship as friends. We were friends before anything ever happened. I think we're in high school when we met. And then like we went on, whatever, we just were really good friends, always had a really good connection. And then I was done with my partner and he was done with his partner at the time, and we just happened to get together. Lo and behold, we were both very severe in addiction. Very severe in addiction that we both tried to say that neither one of us were in. So, you know, because we're like, oh, we shouldn't do that together. And then we ended up doing it together. And it, you know, and in that time, I found myself becoming extremely, extremely submissive and letting him kind of get away with whatever he wants. And then one day in my mind, it just switched over. And I was like, oh, hell no. And so then I became very combative and very verbally abusive. Not gonna lie, I did that. And then when we finally ended up living together with my two boys, we were still in some of our addiction. We weren't using hard drugs anymore, but we were, you know, dealing with the repercussions of starting a relationship in a heavy addiction, coming out of that heavy addiction, and still sometimes falling back into those patterns and everything, because it takes a while when we doing math. It takes a while for your brain never goes back to normal, but it takes a while for you to not have those tendencies, those paranoias, those outbursts of anger. It takes a while. And so my boys, they were in kindergarten, or between kindergarten and third grade, when I would say that, you know, that was probably the hardest part in our relationship. And I'm so sad that I let them see those things. And then we had our daughter, and my husband chose to continue to drink and I wasn't. And so, you know, when someone's a drinker, they, you know, make promises that they're going to do this and that and everything. And I would get angry at him when he wouldn't do those things. And then I shut down, and then he stopped drinking. And I found myself, whenever he would say something and didn't do it as fast as I expected him to do it, I would fall back into thinking those addictive ways of, oh, well, he's never going to do it. Unless I'm a bitch, he's not going to do it. So I'm going to say all these things. And I would bring up some and you know, we have, both of us have said extremely hurtful things to each other. And you know, I took some time to myself, and I'm not gonna lie, I used some psychedelics for opening my mind to process some situations. And you know, I just came to the realization, I'm like, you know, I get so angry and frustrated because you've said these things before, but it was when you were heavy in your addiction. And so my trigger and my experience is to automatically go to being mean and hateful, because when you were in your addiction, that was the only way to get some type of response out of you, for you to do anything. And now neither one of us drink. None of us like drinking. It's not really what we need to do, and we don't do meth or all of those things anymore. And it's just easier for us to say, hey, I'm sorry that I got upset. Or, you know what, I'm not going to continue this conversation because I'm getting upset and I don't want to say mean things. And our kids have been seeing that, and they have also started, you know, instead of being explosive and upset, they'll process. Or sometimes if they can't process, we'll say, you know what, how about you just go to your room, take some time, when you're ready to talk, we'll talk. You know, like it's hard to have kids and have them see that. I know I hated seeing it when I was a kid. It was awful. And then, you know, it just translated into the relationship that my siblings and I had together. The relation, you know, sometimes I felt like I had no respect. Like, it's almost like you lose respect for the parent that you see taking it. Or not necessarily lose, that sounds bad. You don't lose respect for them, but you see in certain situations, like if a male is seeing their father degrade their women, that's how they think that's going to be. And I lost my train of thought, because it's not a disrespect. It's, you see them as the weaker parent. There we go. You see them as the weaker person, the person that, you know, you can get away with treating that way. And I have seen in some situations where you can tell that child is just acting like whichever parent is abusing the other one. And it's just like, oh my God. And that is one of the biggest reasons why I've chosen to take hard looks at myself in situations, because I know I've been that person, and it didn't feel good. And I don't know why. I don't understand how somebody could feel good doing that to somebody else. You know, so like, I can't go back and change what my children saw. But if they ask questions, I can give them the answers. And I'm willing to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why people do it, because they don't obviously feel good about themselves, or, you know what I mean? Like, these people probably, I mean, like Mato's stepmother, or whatever, she probably hated herself. And your ex, you know, like, these people did not love themselves, obviously.
People hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for like with my children, as adults now, my elder son, you know, we were talking about, you know, what's going on, because I could see that my husband would verbally, or I suspected would abuse them verbally when I wasn't around. I worked odd hours. And so I think, because I hear him once in a while saying some things, I'm like, did I just hear that? What? There'd be like these shadows, and I wasn't quite sure what I was hearing, but I know when the children were away, he'd verbally abuse me. But I'm sure they leaked over. I'm sure the kids heard him verbally abusing me, and I don't even realize it. But I know the major abuse was when I was alone, when the kids weren't here. So I believe that he did the same when I wasn't around. And my older son said to me that he blamed me for the abuse because I took it, which is like saying that, you know, yeah, lack of boundaries, he's overstepping me, and I'm allowing this verbal abuse to go on all the time. And I didn't feel strong enough to stand up to him and have a boundary and say no, you know, so he just stepped all over all of us. And so my son was trying to say to me, you know, because there was a conversation about, you know, his father, like, look at how this is, you know, the abuse he's doing. And my son is saying, well, you allow it, you know, so I have, you know, some ownership in that of like, yeah, I'm a broken person and I'm allowing people to step on me. But, you know, that just said to me, I got to heal myself there. I got to get strong. Yeah, I do need to find a voice. Yeah, I do need to step up. So even though his words, my son's words were sort of negative, they were to me healing, and they were very much the truth. And yeah, and I shouldn't be taking it, and I need to step up. At one point with this son, my husband, he was, I think, obviously sometimes abusing him. And he was trying, to tell me in like disciplinary actions or something, for me to go along with what he wanted to do to our son, the discipline or whatever. And I was usually always against it. And my husband felt that I was betraying him. No, you should agree, we should both be doing this to our son. And my son, that same son, said to me, Mom, had you gone along with Father, I would have killed myself. And I know that he has struggled with suicidal, thoughts. I have too. But he's like, because I didn't go along, I stood up, got a boundary, and didn't go along with my husband. He knew somebody was having a voice for him. That's another kind of voice, that I was standing up saying no, and the thing of it is that same son was, diagnosed with autism and everything. So it's, growing up as a child, and it's like, why would you abuse this child who needs so much support, and the second son, everybody's like, well, he wasn't the one verbally abused. And I'm like, there's another kind of abuse, because he's got survivor's guilt. He's hearing and seeing his mother and brother, because we were the ones that the abuse, came at, but he was the golden child, but he knew and heard it all. He was hearing how we were being treated. So he had survivor's guilt because he was verbally talked to differently. He had, a different world. So it was me and my older son, because we're both broken, but then the golden child. So you would think the golden child would take advantage of that, but no, he sided with us because he saw how the abuse was. He would say things like, oh, I see how it is. He didn't experience it, but he had survivor's guilt from it, so he's got his, issues in that way, so, but, as much as I tried, our abuser did separate us in the verbal abuse, so that I didn't know. And then, he didn't want the kids to know. Anyway.
How old are the kids now?
30 and 27.
How are they doing?
Okay, they're both single. They've always been largely single, and there's a lot of me that worries that they, got relationship issues, that's playing out in their lives. I feel like they're both kind of more like, well, I worry that my older son might, the one with Asperger's, might have more what seems like narcissistic tendencies of not being able to connect, that connection kind of a thing. And the younger one, I think, is more like me, the very codependent empath, and lets people stomp on him. But he's only had one girlfriend for 2 years. He's 27. And the other one has had a couple of women, but I think, I'm watching and hoping that they can not play out the situation that they grew up in, but can heal themselves and not let that ball keep rolling forward, but they're both not choosing to be with anybody right now. And I tease them. I'm like, it's okay. You're just missing out on your first divorce, so don't worry about it. We all have that first divorce thing, before you're 30. I'm like, you're saving yourself money, it's okay. But that's just joking. But it's like, I'm kind of like, you're fine. Get to know yourself, be by yourself. It's better that you're learning and knowing and growing by yourself. You don't need that extra thing until you're really, really ready, And so I'm hoping that they'll I mean, they are good men. They're very good protectors of women and everything. You know what I mean? So I'm very honored that that they're both protectors of women. So that's good, because they could have been harmful people. You know what I mean? Like, and they're not. So I have to give them that credit. Makes me happy.
They love their mama.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that they're protectors of women.
Mhm.
SaGonna, do you have one more question? I think we're gonna have to wrap it up soon. How's everybody feeling?
So let's see. Gosh, I'm like, which one? I guess I'm curious about this one. So did you guys confront the person that was, I know some of you have kind of alluded to it, but did you confront the person that was abusing you? If yes, what was their response, reaction? I think we kind of talked about that. Did everybody? I know Krista, you kind of mentioned it. It was kind of like no, but maybe for you others, what was their reaction if you confronted them?
I have a story that in understanding my stepmother's situation, she was actually sexually abused by her father. So I think a lot of that, stemmed from that. And going back to that grandfather, her father, it wasn't till later in life that I realized that not only had he raped both my sisters, but he also raped his own children, both my steps and my half sisters. He didn't give a fuck. He raped everybody. And I didn't find that out. And in northern Minnesota, 4th of July, we always go to the same Lutheran campground, and I had been away for a while. I'm not really close with my siblings. I'd been away for a few years, but they had children. I had my son. So I was like, let me at least try to introduce my son to these, nieces and nephews. And both my stepsisters had told me that this Lonnie, who we called Boppy, had raped him. And during this Hector period that I was going through, defending everybody, I set up a long range rifle on a dirt road, set it all up, had him in my sights. My crosshairs were on his head. And I was laying on the ground, and a big, huge buck just showed up out of the dirt, just appeared. And I wasn't on my spiritual journey, but I knew that was a sign for something. So I packed up my weapon and I went away. And at her funeral, he was there. And my siblings were still terrified. I'm like, you're at a funeral for your mother and you're terrified because this guy's in the room. I'm like, and to see that terror, I was like, damn. So I went over at the funeral and I told him that story, that I'd almost killed him. And I saw the sheer terror in his eyes. And I was like, for years, my sister, who was a hippie child, they used to hitchhike all over northern Minnesota. That's what you did in the 70s. You hitchhike. And all these girls would talk about this gold S10 pickup with a white topper, and that was his car. That was his vehicle. And I don't, going back to that question that you were talking before, my children never saw me either give verbal abuse or take verbal abuse. They saw me as a gentle giant. My name means bear. But they have seen me become violent when it was needed in a situation. And that always bothered me because I was a sweet old dad, but when push came to shove, I was going to step in and make right the wrong, whether it was inside my family, at a Target parking lot, inside a Walmart, wherever it was happening, I was going to step in. When he talked about little kids, I was in a Walmart and this boyfriend was talking to his girlfriend's little boy who was like 7 and, calling him a, dumb little nigger. And I'm like, you don't say that to him. I actually stop. That little boy is going to remember that shit forever. I told him I'm in my 50s and I remember hearing that. But once again, for me, all my abusers are dead and I take solace in that. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they're dead. They can't hurt anybody anymore. So I kind of just pray over that, that nobody else is going to see that abuse or have to hear that abuse. But when I look back at my 2 sisters, I call it stuck. They're stuck in 1976 and they can't get out of it. It got to a point where my one sister became a statistic. She was in an abusive relationship, but she refused any of us, my brother and I, to come in and help her. And he actually trafficked her into Winnipeg, Canada. And she was, for about 10 months, she was a missing Indigenous woman that we were searching for. She could have died. And that wasn't that, that was only a couple of years ago. So when you talk about this abuse, this verbal abuse, she's 58, my sister's 61, and it still is affecting their lives negatively.
The abuser that when I did try to leave, didn't believe me and then proceeded to hold me hostage. Actually, recently, in the last 3 months, at the beginning of January, reached out to me. He still finds ways to interject himself into my life because, unfortunately, we do share a lot of mutual friends. And all of them know about the situation because the blast radius of that situation was huge. That it just went across way too many groups of people and it was just huge. So he still finds ways to be like, oh, so-and-so is talking about you today and it made me think about you. Well, that's not necessarily, it's like he's not verbally abusing me, but he's still letting me know that, oh, I still know what you're doing. I still know that this is going on in your life because of X, Y, of this person. Or he'll be like, oh, my mom brought you up the other day and how much she loves you. And da, da, da. I'm like, no, your mom does not love me because your mom doesn't love herself. No. Or he'll, or he's like, oh, I'm so sorry about everything that happened and everything I did. And da, 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 da. But then I know just little things, so the father of my first children is the one that I cheated on with. He'll say his name wrong. And then at my now husband, he'll purposely say our last name wrong. And those are just little digs that he does to let me know that he still feels like he owns me in some capacity because he knows that that's going to bother me. And let's see, it was in 2007 when this all happened. It is 2022. And I can't even say he's a grown man. And he has children. He has, he had his whole life, racked up some domestic violence charges with that one too. But still always feels the need to interject himself into my life. in one way or another. And it is insane. It is absolutely insane. And when it happens, it does trigger me and it makes me go a little bit manic. And then I can't sleep because it brings me back to not feeling safe, because he stalked me for a year and a half. I could not go anywhere without him or somebody else being there reporting what I was doing to him. And so it's just those little things. Just by sending a message on Facebook. It's not even like actual verbal words. It still messes with me. I do my best to not let it. And then, you know, when it does happen, I let my husband know, and I'm all like, hey, you know, not even going to give the dignity of saying his name. I'll be like, he reached out again and this is what he said. And then me and my husband will sit down and we'll talk about it. Like, how does it make you feel? He's like, what do you need from me so that you don't, you know, end up going into a full blown manic episode? You know, so it's just, yeah, it's been that long, and just those little things still mess with me.
For me, that's like a verbal ejaculate. It's like they eject this thing into your brain and they know it's like toxic, but it's like a boring worm that goes around and around. So half of the energy is them, but then we rented space.
Yeah.
We rented space and then we're playing it out and we're just continuing. That's what I was talking about in my head, this negative talking to myself all the time, because they're renting space with this ejaculate that they thought form negativity, and I'm allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to, a couple of years ago, I mean, it took me this long to say, no, I'm not gonna, shut up, sit down, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. And because I can't, what do happy people do? What do happy people do? Do they have thoughts of flowers? Oh my God, I would love to have thoughts of flowers. I need some flowers in my life. And it's like, but that's on me. I was renting. First they bored the hole. It's like a spell. And then we just take on the spell and believe in it and rent it space and feed it. And how are you? Negative thoughts? Are you okay? How you doing? And I'm like, no, get out of here. I had to fire them all. Like, because I want to think about flowers. Otherwise, it's my fault too, because I'm continuing this thought form, and they know, and they come and they attack and they do it on purpose because they're like, I know I'm going to get you. I'm just going to say this one word. Could be just one word, like a word, purple, and then they know you're going to spin off, you know, and we do it and we allow it, and we got to stop that. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. It is crazy how, just like you said, that one word, just one. It doesn't have to be a sentence, and sometimes it, like you said, it could be the color purple. They could say purple to you, and it will just spiral you down into this. Just, you'll go over every conversation you two ever had. You'll go over every conversation you've ever had for the last 5 years, and then wonder if you did something wrong. And because they said that thing, oh, they're right. I am this awful. I'm purple.
Yeah,
I am
they're
purple.
evil.
That is me.
It's
Like,
evil. It's evil. It's poison, and it's evil. And like you said earlier, why would people do this? Well, you know, because that's not who and how we are. So like, we don't even know, like, why would you do that? So it's like we can't even see it because we're blind to it, because that's not the language that we speak. That's not who we are. So it's just kind of like they're speaking French. No, you know, no comprendo, but that's not French, that's Spanish. You know, it's like,
right?
yeah, I don't know.
No, they'll tell you they're speaking French, but they're speaking to you in
Yeah,
Spanish.
but yeah, I don't even understand. We don't understand why and how they do that. So it's kind of like, I feel like we gaslight ourselves almost, because we can't understand that they're doing it. And they're doing it and they get away with it. And it's, you know, and the more they get away with it, the bigger and bigger. And the more they get away, the bigger, and they just keep on going, taking and taking, you know, and giving this poison. Ugh, so toxic. So anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
So then it is our job to self-talk.
Mhm.
the positive talk, which is hard when you're used to thinking negative thoughts.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was new for me. I like, oh my God, I wonder if people do that. Is that a thing? People have positive thoughts? Like,
Well,
they got to be.
yeah, well, and in recent years, I mean, I there's been, the raising of voices of the minorities and things like that. And in the height of the most angry part of it, I had people asking me to tell me that I needed to pick a side. Because I'm not white enough and I'm not black enough. I'm not white enough for the white people and I'm not black enough for the black people. But because I was raised by white people, I automatically default to white, to African American people. And not everybody, but in some of the experiences that I've had, they're like, oh, you're straight up Oreo. And that means black on the outside, white on the inside. And I've internalized that, because then in certain situations, I don't know what to say. And people will be like, oh, do you say the N-word? And I'm all like, no, because it's just not a proper thing to do in any situation. Like, what? Or people will ask me certain things about my hair, or they'll be surprised, even with my husband, people are surprised that my husband's like 100% Swedish. And then, he used to shave his head. So people would be like, oh, you skinhead and da 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 da. And then people would find out that he was married to me. And even I saw it. He had black coworkers treat him differently and address him differently once they found out he was married to a biracial woman. I have had black men be upset with me because I'm married to a white man. And then I have had, African American women say extremely hurtful things to me, or people say, oh, your mom had jungle fever. What the hell does that mean? I mean, I know what it means, but like, what the hell? Like, why do you think it's okay to say those words to people just because you don't understand a situation? And those are other verbal abuses that, like I said, the one kid in kindergarten said that one thing, still have no clue what his name is. Don't even remember what he looked like. I remember all of those, every single one of them. You really have to be careful about the words you say to people and how you say them.
I think a lot of people don't even think about what they're saying, what comes out of the mouth. They just say a lot of shit without thinking, for sure.
Oh yeah.
And they don't think about the repercussions, like what they're saying. Unfortunately.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate all of you telling your stories and being vulnerable and sharing yourself. It's a big deal, and I just hope that, the people that watch this, they can hear your words and get some strength from it, and it can help them.
I highly suggest everybody use the term, in no part of our relationship is it okay for you to speak to me that way, with your romantic partner, with your coworkers, your bosses, anybody, because that will stop somebody dead in their tracks and make them either step back and go, oh, I was being disrespectful, or you were sure as hell see their true colors and how they respond to that.
The boundary, put up that boundary. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today and for telling your story. I appreciate you. We are gonna wrap it up unless anyone have any last words.
Well, I loved hearing everybody's beautiful story. So it's always good that's why we're here on this planet, is to connect and share. We're here to learn. That's why we're here on this planet. And we've undertaken a bit of harm, but we've learned from it. We could have been hurt and harmed others, and so like Krista, she's being a healer, verbal healer, and that's our role, is to stop that from rolling down the hill towards anybody else. So we need to call it out. And when we see it happening, we say it, right? You know, that's what Chris is saying, like put up that boundary, which is hard for us. So it's really hard work, but you know, we got to strengthen that muscle, little by little, you know, and just stop that from rolling down the hill. Anyway, it was such a blessing to hear everybody's story. So thank you so much. And thank you for including me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and us. It was great. And it's great to have different people's perspective, because it's not always the full on abuse situation that people think about when you say anything connected with abuse. It's sometimes not that big. And it doesn't even have to come from your romantic partner. It could be a friend, it could be a coworker, you know, it could be your boss, it could be your employer in general, but that's a whole other topic. But just know that abuse takes many forms. And if you see one of your friends and they're just slightly off or something seems up, ask them. And sometimes they're not going to say, but just knowing that somebody's interested might help them be able to heal or move on from that situation. So thank you for having us again. It's always a good time.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you guys, and thank you for sharing and being open. Letting me ask you questions.
That's okay, because I'm going to ask you guys if you guys want to be on one of our shows. We're going to call it What Kind of Sugar? We ran into a dilemma of what is it called when a sugar baby is younger or older than the sugar daddy? There's nothing. There is nothing.
What is that?
And then obviously, because we do crime and like controversial topics on my podcast, we would probably find some other things to put in there. But like, I feel like that's another dating interesting topic that can lead to some criminal things happening. But yeah.
I love your podcast. It's fun.
Yeah.